Well, here we go again. Familiar stories, ship collision, man overboard, restriction of cruise passengers. A lot to unpack today, and hopefully we can find some goodness. Cruise news and my views. Let's talk about it. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to La Lido Loca. I'm your host, Tony, here with the latest cruise news and views. It's for your face on a Friday the 5th of April, 2024. And well, I've struggled a little bit with how to structure today's show. It's a sponsored show, and the sponsor ad's pretty upbeat, but some of the stories are pretty heavy. So let's do this. Let me share a light story with you. I invite you to please watch the ad. I tried to make it fun, and then we'll get into some of the heavier stuff. Let's just start with a kind of a light story. The Carnival's back with this. That's right. We've got the new and improved short stack non-whale tail having straight funnel for the Carnival Freedom. It's coming back into service after only being out of service for a couple weeks because the traditional whale tail funnel caught on fire again. The second time in just a few years, we've seen a fire on the funnel of the Carnival Freedom, and now we've seen the return of the straight stack. I'm assuming we have the straight stack as they have to now refabricate whale tail for the Carnival Freedom. Maybe they shouldn't. Maybe they should be straight stacking it for the rest of that ship's days. I don't know, but glad to have that ship coming back into service, and that way people won't continue to get their cruise canceled. So, fun fact, before I was a world traveling cruiser, I'd barely been out of the United States. Once in the 1980s, I went to Toronto in Canada. But in the early 2000s, pre 9/11, I went to Valhermosa in Mexico to do some computer work. I installed a wireless network in a factory down there that made hollow metal doors. Now, fortunately, the company that I worked for had an office in Harlingen, Texas, which is just north of the Mexico-US border. And there was a plant manager there that was facilitating my daily drive across the border down to Valhermosa. And it was during that week of installing that wireless network that I realized how not knowing the language somewhere is a big deal. Every day, the plant manager that had already driven me down into Mexico would take me to the town center of Valhermosa, and we would get lunch at a restaurant, and I had no idea what was going on. I couldn't order food. I didn't know how the money worked. I was completely lost in the ignorance of language, and sometimes that can be true when we're cruising. I've been in situations where I'm like the only person that doesn't understand what is going on. Thinking about that adventure now, I kind of wish I could turn the clock back, because now I've had some experience with the sponsor of today's episode, Babel. Babel is the best-selling language application that has been scientifically proven to get you speaking a new language in just 3 weeks by doing a very simple thing. It has you learn the language through basic conversation. Where do you get food? Where do you go to the bathroom? What's your name? All of those things that seem very basic, and we probably take it for granted in our native language. I'm currently using Babel right now to work through the food and drink when it comes to Spanish. Here's a little look at the application. Working through a little quiz here.
¿Quiere una bebida?
Quiere una bebida. Practical conversation in the language that you are learning. And all of a sudden, when you're in a foreign land on your travels this summer, you won't feel lost and wondering what to do next. If you'd like to try Babel for yourself, excitingly, there's a 20-day money-back guarantee, but you can do it for a discount. Click the link in the description or use the QR code on the screen that you see right there for 60% off of your subscription. Thank you, Babel, for sponsoring today's episode. Was that enough levity for you? Let's look again at my hairdo in the 1980s. What a young punk I was. Okay, let's transition. Let's get heavy for a little bit, and then we'll work our way back out of it. Cruise news story number 2. We have a ship collision occurring in South Africa at the port of Cape Town, where an Ambassador Cruise Line cruise ship has crashed into a cargo ship. The ship in question, the MV Ambiance passenger cruise ship, holds about 1,400 passengers, lost control in high winds and ran into this cargo ship. Fortunately, no one on board the cargo ship, no one on board the cruise ship, crew members, passengers, no one was injured, and it does seem like there is minimal damage that has been done to both of these vessels. The collision is explained in a statement released by Ambassador Cruise Line. They say despite the assistance of 2 tugs and a pilot, Ambiance was unable to maintain position in the strong, gusting winds and made contact with the container ship, which was already alongside. Both ships report only minor damage, and there is no water ingress or pollution. It happens. It happens. I did have the chance to speak to a captain a couple years ago, and we talked about this very thing. I said, what was the hardest part of, the whole navigating a ship experience? And he told me that much like airline pilots say that the takeoff and landing are the hardest parts of doing the pilot job, well, the, coming alongside dock and leaving the dock, getting out to the ocean, often some of the hardest parts of navigating a cruise ship. Glad everybody's okay there, and it sounds like there's a silver lining to that story. No injuries to crew or passenger. Cruise news story number 3 is a tragic story of a 20-year-old man going overboard from Royal Caribbean's Liberty of the Seas. And the eyewitness accounts coming off of that cruise ship, just horrific, just at the high level. It's late night Lido or early morning Lido, people still partying in the hot tubs. This young man, seemingly way too intoxicated, gets upset and jumps off the cruise ship into the dark. Of course, immediately Royal Caribbean responds and they begin their procedures for trying to find somebody that goes overboard. They search for the gentleman. The Coast Guard is engaged to also search for the gentleman. Eventually, the cruise ship is released. The cruise ship has already returned to Fort Lauderdale, and there's been no recovery of the person that went overboard. Like I said, there's a lot of speculative details out there, and out of respect for the family, I don't want to delve too much into that. I don't know. I think we're still under 20 for the year, but that seems like a lot. We're only 3 months in the year. Most of these overboard situations are intentional. It's very hard to fall off of a cruise ship, or, there's usually some sort of something that happens, or, a self-decision or a nefarious act. But just so sad, and definitely thinking about the family and the family that lost this 20 years old, man. That's a kid. All my kids are older than that now. So it's like I said, heavy stuff. Okay, cruise news story number 4. Let's swing to the port of Baltimore. We're about 10 days past the collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge. And at the time, we had 2 cruise ships that were majorly impacted by that because they needed to return to Baltimore: Carnival's Legend and Royal Caribbean's Vision of the Seas. In the wake of the bridge collapse, both of those ships determined that they would reroute their course and make their way to Norfolk, Virginia. Carnival Legend has done that a few days ago, letting passengers off, taking on new passengers, continuing with their cruises. But we still had the Vision of the Seas out there. Yesterday, Vision of the Seas has now brought its passengers to Norfolk, Virginia. In both cases, we've seen both Royal and Carnival provide transportation from Baltimore to Norfolk. In the port of Baltimore, they are continuing with the salvage effort. They've created a 2,000-yard safe zone where they're working on the recovery and the salvage of the bridge, but at the same time they're also opening up channels so that commercial shipping can continue forth, and then eventually cruise ships can make their way back to the port of Baltimore. First channel is opened already. They're getting ready to open a second channel and then a third channel. There is some potential that by the end of the month that cruise ships will be able to return to Baltimore. It puts me in an interesting position because I'm on a cruise that is destined to end up in Baltimore. And we just got word about that cruise yesterday that the determination as to where that cruise is going to terminate has not yet been made because of the timing. I'll be jumping on the Carnival Pride on Sunday in Tampa for a 14-day sailing that will take me to the Southern Caribbean and then up the East Coast with a final destination of Baltimore. We did get notified yesterday that that may or may not happen, and that we'll know if it will or will not happen while we're on the cruise. And so I think people that may have booked this cruise a long time out may already have travel plans based out of Baltimore being the final destination, but I do not. So I'm not sure what to do yet. I haven't booked a flight from Baltimore back to Tampa. I haven't booked a flight from Norfolk back to Tampa, and I'm not sure when to do that. I may just wait and see what happens. Hopefully after the first week of the cruise, we'll get some definitive information. In my gut says that we're going to end up in Norfolk, and I should book a flight from Norfolk to Tampa. I don't know, I don't think there's going to be that much of a cost difference. So I'm just going to wait it out. I think that's my plan. What would you do if you were in my situation? Would you go ahead and book your flights, or would you wait it out? Progress continues to be made in Baltimore. The city itself continues to recover and to mourn with memorials and, funerals for those that have passed. It's, again, I think I said it a couple days ago. It's amazing how a 20-second event can alter so much after that. Baltimore update. There you go. Now, this next cruise news story does raise concern for me because it's one of my favorite places to go. I'm going to tell you all about that, but first, let me quickly invite you to subscribe. If you like staying up to date with everything going on in cruising, please consider subscribing with the notification bell on. That way you don't miss out on any of these episodes. Big ups for people commenting on yesterday's video. I will be dealing with those comments from yesterday's video for the next week. So like I said yesterday, if you're ever going to comment on a video, you should do it on today's video. But yesterday's video is the important one to comment on. More will be revealed next Thursday. But a big thanks again to everybody that's a part of the Loca fam, that follows the channel, that likes, comments, all those things. Thank you guys for all the positive words yesterday. It does my heart good. So I appreciate it. But what doesn't do my heart good is the limits of cruise passengers in cruise ports. It's a pretty common debate right now, the will of the people versus the will of commerce, that epic struggle. And we've got another town, a popular town, saying maybe, just maybe, we would like to limit the amount of cruise passengers that can flood us in a day. And this time it's a pretty popular cruise port up there in Alaska. Juneau, what I'm talking about. Juneau, Alaska is saying, we want to limit how many people can come here in a day. And look, you got to love the way the government works. I used to go crazy going to meeting after meeting in corporate America, like a meeting about the meeting that you were going to have, so you knew how to prepare for the meeting that somebody else's meeting was going to be in, so that you could present in a meeting about a meeting about a meeting. I feel like most of my work week was spent in meetings, and it was mind numbing because I never felt like you got anything done. Well, I imagine that government is a lot like that. In Juneau, there's been a meeting between the council there and cruise lines to develop a conceptual idea of limits of cruise passengers. So they've approved the concept of limiting cruise passengers without, designating how many cruise passengers and cruise ships that were. They've just conceptually agreed that they will limit cruise passengers at some point, maybe like in 2026. So it's at a very low conceptual level. So they've conceived it. And now that it's conceived, we have to wait 9 months, and then it becomes the law. No, maybe that's a different process. I need to go watch the I'm Just a Bill. Shout out Ludacris. Now, I don't know what the next steps are, but I think the end result could be limitations on cruise passengers in Juneau. And I don't like that. Do you know what I mean? Cruising's wild. Cruising's wild. It's very much a mirror of the rest of life. You got your highs, you got your lows, you got your happiness, you got your tragedy. And today's stories certainly reflect that. But we got each other. And so happy Friday, everybody. Have a great weekend. I'll see you on Monday from a cruise ship. Thanks again, Babel, for sponsoring today's episode. This is Tony for La Lido Loca. Until the next time, we'll see you on the Lido. Bye.
Cruise news, cruise news, cruise news, it's over.